All right. We are live and broadcasting. Attendees are coming in. Welcome, everybody, to the day two of the 2020 eTourism Summit. We have 21 days focused on winning in 2021 and an amazing panel today. I want to thank all of you who joined us yesterday for the kickoff with Sarah Quinlan. Sarah was an amazing kind of macro economist and known by the Wall Street media as the Duchess of Doom, and she had some great 20,000-foot views of what the travel industry looks like. If you think about building a marketing plan for 2021, the idea is that yesterday was the 20,000-foot view. Today might be the kind of the situation analysis, where we stand and what the future looks like. And then as we get into next week, we'll start looking at strategic plans and marketing stacks and campaigns like that. But I couldn't be more excited with the group of people that we've got on board today to help really identify what's the situation as we know it today. What's the situation look like in the travel industry as we evolve into the fourth quarter of 2020 and into the first half and latter half of 2021. So thanks you all for being here. I'd especially like to thank Andrea Godfrey from Longwoods International. I started working with Longwoods International. I went back and looked today, 25 years ago, working on working with Longwoods at the city of Denver. And it was a great experience and a great relationship that's carried on through 25 years. So thank you so much for Longwoods for sponsoring today's session. And I'd like to just hand it over to you to tell us a little bit more about how all Longwoods International has evolved in those last 25 years.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be a part of this panel today. And the Longwoods team and I are so pleased to be sponsors of this 21 days of ETS. It's been so interesting to see how everyone is evolving and doing things digitally this year, and we're just so pleased to be sponsoring this with y'all over the next course of basically a month of pushing out this great content. So as you mentioned, you have a long history with Longwoods, going back 25 years. We started in Toronto over 40 years ago. We now have offices across the US. We really focus primarily in the travel and tourism vertical, so work with many of y'all that I see are joining us today. And we really have been known for over 30 of those 40 years for our Travel USA study. We run the largest and longest running visitor profile study here in North America. And really the last several years, Longwoods has been synonymous with resident research. So we're really at the forefront of resident sentiment research here in the US. And it was probably about 2-3 years ago, we started hearing from the market here in the US and in North America, where the industry was really starting to ask about resident sentiment. And this whole concept of studying resident sentiment was something that Europe actually really embraced several years ago. They really started running with this idea that it's the resident first, and really putting front and center this engagement with the community and sustainability. And as with most things at Longwoods, our research and product development starts with our partners. And when we hear a need, we work to develop and design in that way. And so 2 years ago, we developed the first national resident sentiment study here in the US with Destinations International. And this year, we did the largest study of its kind, talking to over 4,000 Americans coast to coast about their sentiment towards the industry. And we really took a holistic approach, digging into this interplay of travel and tourism and their perceptions of how it supports their economy and help really drive their quality of life. But, Will and everyone else on the call, in early spring, we were doing planning, and much like many of us, we were taking note of what was happening over in Europe. And we really saw the disruption that COVID was bringing the travel and tourism industry over there. And we saw it coming to the US, and we realized that sentiment really was going to be this new essential KPI. And we really didn't understand to what extent this was going to be such an important area of focus, but we knew that we needed to do something to start digging in. And so on March the 11th, we went into market with the first travel sentiment study focused on COVID specifically. And, you know, all of us might be kind of asking our question of, well, how does the travel sentiment tie with resident sentiment, and why does it matter? And that's really the conversation that we're very excited to have today. So I have with me several of industry, I would call them friends, that are on this panel. So I know we've been looking forward to today. We have Erin Francis Cummings, the president and CEO of Destination Analyst. Erin, you are in the airport there in Puerto Rico, correct?
That's correct, Andrea, and thank you for all my fellow panelists for tolerating this, and all of you online as well. But isn't it nice to see someone out traveling again?
It's probably one of the best sights I've seen in quite a while. We also have with us Brian London, the president and CEO of London Tourism Publications. And we also have Adam Sass, the president of Tourism Economics. So to tee us up today, for this conversation of traveler and resident sentiment, if we could put my slides back up, I will start us off with kind of building a foundation of some of the things that we've learned over the course of the last seven months when it comes to sentiment with travelers and residents. So as I said, in March the 11th, we went into field and we started asking American travelers sentiment questions about COVID-19. And it's been a wonderful evolution over the last 7 months to see how each one of us on the panel has been looking at sentiment and the travel market and the impact it's had. And so this has been an interesting journey, one that I think none of us thought we would be doing back in January. But with that, let me set the foundation here for us. So we go and we on a routine basis ask 1,000 Americans over the age of 18 about their sentiment towards travel. And you will see how this is going to evolve to really the synergy with the traveler and the resident as we start to talk about the data here. So what have we learned? It's been 7 months. We've learned that pent-up demand is real, and the desire to travel has remained steady and it's remained constant. Over the last 7 months, we've seen that about 70%, give or take, we see the upper lower balance here on this chart, plan to travel in the next 6 months. But we also know that while a large share of American travelers plan to travel, we also know that they're changing their travel plans and that this has shifted over time. And the data here is from our most recent wave where we went into market last Thursday and we released it this Tuesday. So if you see a static and a non-trending data point, I want to point out how recent this is. So of those travelers that are planning to travel in the next 6 months, about 70% plan to or have changed their travel plans. But when we started looking at this over time, we've been asking Americans about this since March, we started to see something very interesting in August and September. We see stronger evidence of a cautious recovery. So what we saw here was that the share of Americans that were planning to reduce travel plans that were planning to travel in the next 6 months, that were planning to reduce as opposed to cancel, was shifting in a positive way. And Adam, you can keep me honest when we start going into the dialogue. What I think is really positive about this when we look at this from an industry perspective is when we're talking about travelers who had plans to travel in the next 6 months, we're talking about people who are planning to travel throughout the fall travel season. Let's see, it looks like my slides have gone away a little bit here. There we go. So really what we started noticing over time is every week and every time we went into market, we actually asked them what were the biggest factors impacting their decisions to travel in the next 6 months. And one thing became very clear early on, that this is a health crisis. It is not an economic crisis that is currently impacting the travel industry. So we consistently saw around half of Americans saying that fear of COVID-19 is what is impacting their decision to travel in the next 6 months, where concerns about the economy and transportation costs remained at or below about 25%. And since this is a recovery built on the perceptions of health and safety, we've been asking 3 fundamental questions: supporting opening up community to visitors, safety traveling outside their own community, and feeling safe dining in local restaurants and shopping in local retail stores. So this right here, these 3 lines of questions is what is become so important when we talk about our resident. Is someone said early in, our partners at Miles, actually, it was Chris Adams, said that our resident was going to be our first traveler. And this has become so evident that we have to get our residents out into our own communities and feeling safe doing so, and get them feeling comfortable welcoming others into our own community before they are actually going to become a traveler themselves. And so these 3 questions are something that are so vital. And we consistently, or as of today, actually, we see that a little bit less than Americans say that they do feel safe doing these things. So we have a ways to go. And several weeks ago, we asked about really the factors that are impacting how they're feeling on these scales. And really the primary challenge that we seem to have right now is unclear, inconsistent guidelines when it comes to health and safety and the standards that are expected in different destinations. And so, I think Will, and, as we transition this over, the resident's going to become so important for 2 reasons. Is number one, the resident's at the core of what we do in this industry. They work in our attractions, they work in the hotels, they service our restaurants, they are our partners for DMOs. And, it's kind of that old saying of crisis breeds opportunity. And as an industry right now, we have a massive opportunity to really engage our community and create tourism development that is beneficial for the community at large. And number 2, Will, our first traveler is going to be our resident. And we have to really work on getting them feeling comfortable in our community before we can expect them to turn into travelers. And so, with that, Will, I think we can take my slides down and start hearing from all of us.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. That's great information, a great way to kickstart kind of where the consumers are feeling. And I know, Aaron, you've been doing a lot of that. I think the resident sentiment is amazing. I think that the confidence in travelers being comfortable going out. I know that Destination Analyst, you've come out and said that once we get somebody out into a restaurant, they're more likely to go further afar, and once they take one trip, they're more likely to go to Puerto Rico. So, there's a lot of that's momentum. And I guess the news that came out late last night about the president and the first lady getting contracting COVID, I think in probably the most secure environment of testing everybody around them is going to be a little bit of a setback. But how much do you see the trends as they are, both Aaron and Andrea, being impacted by kind of news events and other things that are out there? How important is that to the consumer confidence?
I'll jump in, Andrea.
Yeah.
Every week when we present our findings, I put the news as part of it to give the context, because then we just know, all of you online that are travel marketers know the news does impact it. And I can't wait to see when we're fielding right now the news this morning, how that's going to impact. I was going to note last week we saw, and Andrea, you might have seen in your data too, but we did see a little tiny slide back in concern, like people started to get a little bit more concerned about contracting coronavirus. And I think that was because a lot of the news was around what's going to happen this fall. A lot of warnings we're hearing in the news. So we did see that and how traveling consumers were feeling. They were a little nervous. But, there's still almost 2/3 of them are saying they're going to travel this fall. So I think if we keep pushing the safety message, they'll keep, and we behave safely when we're traveling, I think that we can keep that confidence that built up over the summer up.
Right.
So Aaron, we noticed, sorry.
No, Andrea, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, Aaron, interesting, when I saw that with y'all's data, it was interesting that we saw, I don't know if you noticed on my chart, we saw a little blip. One data point doesn't make a trend, but we saw a blip in terms of cancellation rates with change rates last week. It will be something we're going to keep an eye on, and I'll be curious to see how the next couple waves look, especially as we move into fall, because it does, Aaron, we've seen the same thing in our data. What's out in the news does seem to really definitely impact the perceptions of safety.
So we'll turn around a little bit later and talk a little bit about what can be done to address that, because I think it's so important to use the data. But I guess maybe, Adam, if we could kind of set again in that idea of building a strategic plan and starting with the kind of the state of the state. You've done a ton of speeches, presentations on kind of where we are today, where we're looking to be and projecting to be, and you know, the end of 2020, the first half of 21, and kind of when that full recovery comes. So I guess if you could give us kind of the Cliff Note version of kind of where you're seeing the projection of this this industry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, it obviously takes a certain audacity to predict where this is going. But hey, I'm here for that. And I think the most the most likely scenario that we're seeing, and a lot of our forecasts and our advising of clients kind of sense that we want to think about 2021 in two halves, and I think that can be helpful as you know, as we're tracking kind of, you know, daily, weekly, monthly data. Realize that especially as we move into the fall, I'm not surprised to see the downtick or the downward trend in terms of, you know, more people canceling their vacations in the Longwoods data, because we're shifting from the traditional holiday season to more business and group travel. And so the next 6 months are going to continue to be very difficult. And, you know, there's going to continue to be disparity across destinations. Certain destinations that are primarily drive markets, more exposed to leisure, of course, they will outperform, especially urban markets, large urban markets who are exposed to group and international. But you take that disparity away, and noting that actually the summer was fairly good for some of these destinations, the next 6 months are going to be tough. And so, you know, it all really hinges on containment of the virus. That, of course, is directly connected to the approval and rollout of a vaccine. So I think we've got to be kind of looking for, you know, when do we get real traction on the recovery across the board? It's the second half of next year. And that said, we could see a significant amount of pent-up demand as we get there. And so a lot of the, you know, kind of where we are as an industry, where our clients are, it's about how can we survive to that point, and also then accelerate that recovery, especially as we get traction in those markets. Kind of the big themes then, as we've modeled this out in different scenarios, is that the volume of travel in the U.S. Reaches its pre-pandemic peak in 2023. So it's a bit of a run there, but a lot of the gains, the majority of the gains, actually happen in that latter part of 2021 into 2022. So there's going to be a really strong pickup. It's just a matter of getting there to the point where people do feel safe to travel.
You know, rather than thinking, you know, when we get back to 19 levels, which were, you know, after 10 years of record growth, what do you say the recovery percentage is by 22? By, you know, after a full year of kind of back in the game.
Yeah, so we have the second. I can even make that a little bit better. The second half of 2021 is going to be within about 85% of where we were in the second half of 2019. Now, in a normal world, we would say, oh no, we're down 15%. We're not in a normal world. And so we say, we've reclaimed 85% of these losses. And so that's, you know, so that's, again, that second half of next year, then you're really dealing with the residual effects of, you know, concern about traveling and the effects of continuing to rebuild after the recession. But then we get into kind of a more normal range of losses. And then 22, you know, in 2022, by the end of the year, you know, by the second half of that year, you're within 10% of those prior peaks. So we get a lot of it back early. It's just that kind of that last bit takes longer to get.
And Brian, I know that that's a ton of information, but I guess that also is an opportunity to figure out how to frame, as we're building marketing plans for next year, you know, what success can look like and what's reasonable to expect. to inform partners and industry and everybody kind of what is expected for 21 and 22.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was taking notes. Adam, I was waiting for you to let me know what stocks I should buy so I could take advantage of the upswing. That's why I dialed in, really, was to get Adam's stock pick. But hopefully he'll be sharing those towards the end of the call. One of the things that I look at, in addition to the data, is really how is the industry responding to the data. There probably falls into initially two buckets. A deep discount bucket, where you see a lot of value ads like Universal Orlando doing a buy one get one free kind of deal. And then also the voucher system, which we're seeing in a lot of destinations, really aimed at the residents. Staycations are becoming more popular as a marketing tactic. Even in Arizona, I saw in Mesa they're offering $150 voucher on area attractions if a local resident stays in one of their hotels. And and what this opens up is the opportunity for really tourism to remind residents that the quality of life they enjoy locally is due to a lot of this travel that comes in from out of the area. A lot of the infrastructure is built to serve a non-resident, but here the residents taking advantage of this infrastructure. So it's a good chance for tourism to remind residents that their quality of life really is improved because of travel and visitation.
Yeah, and that's likely to work, Aaron. I saw in your surveys that there's a correlation between deals and willingness to risk the travel too.
Yeah, I've been saying that's one of the positive indicators that now there were people who not even a deal was going to get them to travel because it was all about staying safe from infection and they're concerned about the virus. So to see there being a shift now that people said, yes, I can be inspired to take a trip that I hadn't thought of before by a discount, and we look at that as a positive movement and more openness to travel.
So great information too. And I think, Andrea, when we go back to the resident sentiment, and you guys started that project well before COVID, and it was a great idea then. It's a better idea now. But how is that informing? How are you seeing that informing, destination marketing companies in terms of not just getting people out to the restaurants like we did early in the pandemic, takeout and kind of support local business, but starting to connect and really build develop programming to kind of get the community on board with the tourism industry in each market?
Yeah, it's a lot like Ryan was mentioning, that it's a lot of the things that a visitor will enjoy are the same things that a resident will. And when we started asking, we've asked 3 times throughout the last 7 months if people plan on doing staycations, they are. And we're starting to see a lot of destinations embrace this concept of building that community promotion and community advocacy by going to their resident and letting them know what there is to do and enjoy within the community. And, it's, like Aaron is seeing in your data, it's that people are now starting to take, I noticed that in some of your research that they're willing to take more of a risk when it comes to, or they're willing to venture out, I should say, if there's a price discount or an offering. It gets back to the conversation that, and I think this applies to destinations and brands. Yesterday, I was listening to the Delta CEO talking about the need for consistency of communication of health and safety standards. We're starting to see the industry destinations as well take on these programs of educating people about what makes it safe at their destination or on their plane or in their hotel, and really moving beyond that kind of, earlier in the summer, it was the theater of wellness, having someone out there cleaning the hotel lobby at 3 p.m. instead of 3 a.m. But now we're seeing this really get embraced at a larger scale, and coupling this and building comfort and security and feelings of safety along with offerings that get the community out is where we're seeing the communities and the travel brands specifically really start to move the needle.
Yeah. And I don't think that the travel brands really embraced that as much as we probably would have thought as early as we would have hoped. I think that's certainly one of the criticisms that we heard yesterday from Sarah Quinlan. You have to embrace it and go all in, because I think all the research that all of you are showing is that, once you get out and feel a little comfortable, getting out and about, then you're more likely to go a little bit further, and then you're going to go and do another activity. I just think that data, Aaron, is really, really important to reinforce to all DMOs to help their communities come along and start to build some momentum instead of kind of just wait and see what happens.
I think one of the issues on that, though, is just that we're facing is the travel shaming piece that comes in. This is something new that we're having to deal with. We spent the last decades where people bragged about travel and it's a big part of their identity. And now that's one thing I think that we have to deal with, the challenge. Because we do want people to show travel can be done safely and feel good about it and not have to, but I think there's a fear of what other people will think out there. I mean, I know I feel it right now. I actually wondered before coming on here, I was like, are people going to judge me that I'm traveling? So that is, I think, a little bit of a threat.
Interesting. So encouraging people some of these campaigns that we're seeing destinations doing right now, where they're encouraging their residents to get out and share what they love about their destinations, kind of helps to get past that and kind of help get people over the fear of being out and about and enjoying life.
Yeah, I think if starting on your theme of starting at home and showing that, yes, you can go out and enjoy and do it safely, and that other people are doing it safely, and maybe the people visiting that area are also being safe. I think, it's good if you engage your residents in that.
Well, and that's where it becomes so important, when we talk about this component of the resident is, there is the travel shaming, and people, even if they don't feel the shame, they are, to your point, Aaron, they're cautious about it. They're worried if people are going to shame them about it. But that's where there's this kind of, it's almost it's a need more than it is an opportunity. I think rose-colored glasses say there's this opportunity, but there's this need to engage residents and to have them have a seat at the table, because if you don't have a pulse on, be it a travel brand or be it a DMO, on what are the concerns that your residents have about when it comes to travel, we're not going to be able to build those programs and develop the communications that build travel in a positive way that either makes them feel comfortable and confident bringing people into their own community or getting out in and of themselves. And so that's where having that resident stakeholder is so important when we talk about, moving through 2021 and beyond with what we're developing, because, Adam, as you said, we're looking at 23 for full recovery back to 19 levels. So we have some time where we can really shape the messaging and bring that seat to the table so that we can do this in a fully informed way.
Yeah, and one thing as we start to address that, Adam, that I'd love to get your insight on it. If 80% of the travel businesses are small businesses, and we heard yesterday, this is at least for the next 6 months, we're in kind of survival mode. Do you see a lot of consolidation within the industry, or do you think that these the pressures are going to be permanent? Are there things that we need to be doing as destinations to really ramp up and support the small businesses even more than the industry already has?
But this is one of the big risks to the industry and to the recovery, is the survival of small businesses. I mean, some of the data do indicate you've got about 55% of small businesses within the leisure and hospitality industry that are at risk of not surviving this. And it's one of the reasons why, another stimulus bill is so essential. And, one of the, as we think about how does this connect to resident sentiment, the economic data that we're looking at actually has two applications. One of them is to advocacy, and one of them is to resident sentiment. And I'll share with you what I think some of the data are that can have both of those applications. So we got the new BLS data this morning for the month of September. The unemployment rate fell again to 8.4%. It's good news. However, if you look at it carefully, we realize there's still 11 million jobs that have been lost since the beginning of this. If you look at it even more carefully, you see that 36% of all those jobs that remain lost are in the leisure and hospitality industry. So more than 1 in 3 of the jobs lost are in industries that support our travelers. And so the message as far as advocacy becomes really clear. It's that the only way that we get the economy back on its feet is by getting people traveling again. Because just too much of the losses are concentrated within the travel industry to get whole as an economy any other way. All right, so that's a clear advocacy message. But then the resident message and the resident sentiment message is they kind of overlaps there, right? Look, our economy is damaged, and the reason is, and this is our local economy is, has been, knocked on its back. The reason, one of the major reasons, is that travel has been hit, and so that same data at the national level exists at the local level, and they're really strong messages as far as sentiment for residents that can influence the way that residents feel and realize that their well-being and the well-being of their community is directly linked to what's going on in travel. And that can begin to move the needle on the way that people feel about the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a crisis in our industry, and any ideas that we have that we can help our partners start to activate that outside of what U.S. travel is doing so well at the national level, but to do that at the local level. Brian, do you have any thoughts on kind of opportunities for destinations to embrace the messages that we've heard from the resident study and the what we know from Aaron about destinations, travelers needing the encouragement to get out and about, and residents needing that to support small businesses and how they all connect the dots.
Yeah. Oh gosh, now I'm wishing I did, but as I'm thinking of something really, really nice, what I was going to add some seasoning here was that we had heard from the United Airlines operating officer. He said that he's predicting business travel, for example, comes back when office workers are no longer working remotely, and office workers are back, in downtown office buildings. And that's an example of connecting the travel industry to the local economy. There's a lot of businesses, small businesses and restaurants and hotels. And a lot of hotels are often small businesses themselves, although they might fly a corporate brand flag. And, there's a lot of economics that goes on in downtowns just from people working downtown. And that's going to play a leading role. So opening up the economy in a safe way where we can all feel like we don't have to work remotely anymore, we can be back in the office, will lead to more residents interacting with tourism-related businesses, which will provide some stimulus for them until they're waiting out kind of this return to the 85% that Adam was identifying earlier.
Interesting. So I've got a question, Andrea, for you and for Aaron and Adam as well, but everybody kind of playing on this one. But there seems to be a crisis in confidence in America in general. I mean, we don't necessarily trust TV news, we don't trust internet news, we don't trust politicians. We don't really trust a lot of anything. And that Gallup poll, I think, is one of the most fascinating things to look at every year. But it's clear that we do the single highest organization is small businesses. That's who we trust. And so I think the extent that if that is the case, how we're able to marry small businesses doing things right and doing all the little things, the safety and wellness messages right, and encouraging them, that is probably going to be much better than having a mayor or a governor or a CDC person telling us what they think we should be doing. And I wonder if there's an opportunity in both for resident sentiment, for traveler sentiment, for destinations to really encourage those small businesses to take up ownership on that, because that's who travelers trust. So I don't think we trust our other sources of information that much.
There definitely is. That's where I've seen some of the best success stories are the destinations that are doing those cleanliness promotion programs and moving the narrative to talking about health and safety, and they're engaging their smaller local partners in that. And especially, this isn't something we've asked in the study, so this is me speaking outside of our survey, is people's worlds have gotten smaller than what they've been in before. And what we engage with are our family or the other persons who live within our household or who are within our small communities. And we're not getting on planes, we're not going to the offices. And so where word of mouth has always been such an important driver for just say travel marketing in general, word of mouth, especially for our local establishments that people really are engaging with more probably now than they were when they were out on the road a lot, is really so important. And I think what's been interesting is kind of that old, it seems like what's old is new again. We talk about some of the principles with travel and with market research or with marketing is word of mouth is really, really positive. And who do we go to for word of mouth? Most often it's people within our network. And I think that translates really well into the current state of things as well.
Absolutely.
Will, you brought up the trust issue, and I mean, one of, all of you online, all of us, there have been some, these strange silver linings from COVID, right? And for destination marketing organizations, one of the silver linings is we've seen the trust in those organizations rise higher than we typically see when we survey American travelers. And we see travelers saying they want destination level information on safety, and seeing that they trust the DMO to provide that. And so I think that it's a great opportunity. You talked about small business and how much you trust small business. Well, those small businesses are working with their DMO. We're looking to the DMO to be the leader in that. I mean, that's wonderful. And I will say, even though it's depressing, Will, like you said, that we don't seem to trust anything anymore. I have seen consistently, though, that Americans do show that they care about other people more than themselves. Like their level of concern about other people they love getting COVID is always higher than their own personal concern, and they care about the national economy more than they're concerned about their own personal finances. I take that as it's more positive than we might think.
That is good news. A little empathy and a good news of opportunity for DMOs. But I think, to your point, it's great to see if destination marketing organizations are seeing their travelers have more confidence in them. I think I've also seen DMOs playing a bigger role locally than they ever have historically in terms of an active engagement within the community. Community partnerships become more and more important, and especially in these times when every business in the community is struggling to kind of evolve into, how do they market, how do they promote, how do they provide the right opportunity. So I think there's just a real opportunity in that space between small businesses, the DMOs, and the travelers down the road. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, Adam, I'd also love your perspective on this too, but I think, looking down the road, Will, from this conversation of having DMOs get very involved with their local small businesses, from, Adam, as you were saying, there are two use cases for resident sentiment. It's to drive engagement with the community, and it's also, it's advocacy, get travelers out there, but it's advocacy. And Adam, you said earlier, for the next 6 months, we're going to kind of have to buckle down and get through this time, and engaging the small businesses and for DMOs and looking outside of kind of their traditional KPIs for return on investment that they've been doing before is going to be really important. And from an advocacy perspective, especially next year, we're all going to need to start thinking about the pool of dollars that are out there to keep our DMOs open, and engaging our local small businesses and figuring out, as DMOs, what are those ways to show the value beyond just a traditional 7-to-1 or 11-to-1 ROI is going to be so crucial. And that's where that voice of the small business is going to become really important, to learn what is it that the DMO can do to support that small business outside of just the traditional advertising dollars.
Yeah, I think that touches on this whole idea of DMOs being a catalyst for economic development beyond the travel industry, by making a place not only somewhere that's attractive to visit, but somewhere that's attractive to live and invest. And DMOs have always sort of played a shadow role in economic development as oftentimes behind the scenes partners with economic development when it comes to a bid for a site location. But that could become a more pronounced and visible role of a DMO out of this as DMOs seek to establish their value proposition in a more broad way than, as you say, Andrea, that dollars spent per dollars invested, because economic development really does hinge on a lot of the same things that make a destination successful for visitors. So I think that role, not only continuing to ensure that DMOs are involved in economic development, but to ensure that it's communicated that what they do is a critical part of the economic development ecosystem.
Absolutely. So I would like to shift gears here a little bit. And by the way, anybody, all of the audience participants, any questions you have, please go on to the Q&A and upload any questions, and we'll make sure to get some time to get back to those questions. But I wanted to shift kind of into the traditional marketing planning and the role that all of the information that you all provide every day to destinations in terms of kind of providing guidance to inform their marketing planning. And that's a big challenge right now. I had one quick question. I'd love to hear from kind of each of you how you would define near-term, mid-term, and long-term, right? It's no longer creating, I don't think there's a lot of people out there right now creating a marketing plan for 2021, but probably rather incremental pieces between now and Q4 and then into the first of the year. So I just love to kind of get your sense in terms of, maybe we start with you, Adam, in terms of the recovery of kind of what the kind of marker points are and how our destination marketers could start thinking in advance and kind of getting enough confidence to start making plans with confidence.
Well, it should be said that there are parts of the market in terms of functions of DMOs that are actually robust. So some of our clients are doing really well in group sales for future meetings, right? So in that sense, there's a lot of anticipation of meetings coming back. And so if you're looking through the lens of sales, group sales, that's up and running in a lot of places. Partly because events have been postponed, canceled, put off, and but partly because meeting planners and organizers are continuing to schedule events and anticipating that there will be demand. And so the sales side is already very much in action. In terms of short term, from here forward, I think we need to look at that kind of through the spring. So now through the spring. So however you measure that, probably another at least 6 months. And so that's really where things are going to continue to be slim. And so marketing strategy remains close to home, drive markets, some element of staycations. But it's how can we make the most of what we've got to work with? Then it's the summer of 2021 where I think DMOs and properties and resorts and attractions can begin to think about marketing in a more traditional way, but probably still oriented to drive in a way that is unique to the situation. And that's as much a function of the economy as it is going to be COVID. Always happens during recessions. People drive when they fly. So hopefully that's kind of positioning us toward what we could call business as usual as we move into 2022.
Awesome. Andre, what's your take on near term, mid-term, and long term?
Timelines with how we're kind of looking at and talking to our clients about moving into their marketing plans match up quite well with what Adam and his team are looking at is the short term, really talking to the regional drive. So talking to your residents, people within your area. It's about building consistency of message right now. In whatever markets you are targeting, it's about being consistent. That is the big hampering thing right now, is consistency of messaging and clarity of messaging. And so really in the short term, that really should be the focus. And as destinations start looking at creating those marketing plans through 2021, and as we start moving to kind of when things return to business as usual, they need to take a couple of things into perspective. It's, you know, I look at their planning as a three-legged stool. You need to understand your traveler. So who's driving your recovery? And as Adam said, some of these clients and destinations are having record summers. Some are sitting with hotels empty. So it's going to be unique to each destination. Is figuring out who's driving the recovery. What is it that is the sentiment of your traveler that's keeping them or driving them to your destination? And keeping a pulse on the resident, because your resident is going to be your first traveler here in the short term. And keeping a pulse on how that ebbs and flows, because like we were talking about earlier, the news cycle, the vaccine cycle, and the planning, that impacts, you know, people's outlook and their intent. And so keeping a pulse on that resident sentiment and doing this development of programs and marketing that keeps in line with the community needs is really important. And then looking ahead to advocacy. I mean, Will, I think as we start to look towards the second half of 21, that's going to be big for brands and destinations alike. There's going to be a pool of dollars. There is a great deal of pent-up demand. The data shows us that. And so it's going to be about advocating and showing the value for what we've done as an industry and kind of that more short term that we're talking about.
Absolutely. That's great insight. Erin?
Thinking of what I would have to add, Andrea and Adam, our surveys of meeting planners and of course our consumer data supports everything that they've just said. I mean, in the near term, I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I mean, we're seeing they're saying they're going to travel this fall. So I think marketing and doing it, travel marketing right now is probably going to be valuable. I mean, half the travelers last week that we surveyed that said they plan to travel this fall, they said they could be motivated to visit a new place that they hadn't considered. Adam and Andrea both talked about pent-up demand. I mean, that's an indicator of that. So travel is going to happen. I will say though, what we're seeing in the qualitative when we interview travelers and stuff, and then we do also see this in the data when we ask them. I think there is, and probably why Adam is saying it's not going to recover until 2023. I think for a while there is going to be a carefulness about spending. Like we saw this summer, while there was the travel volume, I don't think the spend was there. And people on the destination level, and Andrea, you might have seen this with your clients, but people said they were just more cautious about their spending. And when I've interviewed business travelers, they say they're going to be more cautious about, like, it's not going to be this period of excess that we were enjoying before COVID hit. So that might be with us for a little while. So we may not, just the economic impact might not be there for some time. And then I'm really keeping my eye on business travel because our industry can't recover without corporate travel to return. So Adam probably has that other data that he looks at. I've been trying to ask people in our survey that travel for business, like, well, when's it coming back? And I do my own informal surveys of people that I know that work for big corporations in San Francisco where I live. The good news is I think, to some way, again, not scientific, but it seems like businesses are getting more comfortable and that the employees do want to start going back out on the road more than they had, in July and August.
No, absolutely. It's a really interesting dynamic. And then obviously as a event producer, we're going to have 2 days of live in person and of eTourism Summit in Orlando in November. But it's really an interesting dynamic. It's the travel, it's the safety component, it's the budget component, it's that whole piece. But you definitely, there is a demand consistently across every segment in which we operate that people want to get back together and not only recreate those bonds, but also to start to do business. And businesses, Zoom's great and virtual meetings are great, but that nothing replaces that. Brian, just to you on the near term, short term, or near term, midterm, and long term, putting on your DMO researcher hat. What would you add?
Oh, I think it's going to be awful in the near term, and maybe like because of the cooler weather, it will feel like things are better midterm. And then long term, I still think there's a shakeout to really happen. Yes, we'll come back, of course, the industry cycles, but there's a lot of legacies that aren't going to be present next summer. A lot of things that we probably took for granted or assumed always were and always will be, I just don't see still being present. We're going to have to change the way we go about things. The pandemic has probably, just accelerated all of the ideas that we were going to do, or all the technology, substitutes that were probably on the back burner got pushed up to the front burner. And now there's a sizable segment of the population that's just comfortable with that as an alternative. And so technology is making its way. And more important than that is near, mid, and long term are really the residents' frustration. When tourism was going gangbusters, it was easy to say, well, look how good this is for the overall economy, and really setting aside maybe frustrations of our local residents that they had with either over tourism or a culture fit, a lack of a culture fit of the visitor. And I think those things are going to come back stronger now, especially as you alluded to in this age where trust is very low. A lot of folks feel like their voices aren't being heard. This is a way for them to be part of the conversation, whereas before maybe they weren't. I read 2 articles that I'll just mention. The first was out of Thailand, where if you visit a national park in Thailand and you leave your trash behind on the nature trail, they'll mail it back to you as an example of some of the pushback. And then the second example is from Mammoth Lakes, where the residents signed a petition to get the Tourism Bureau to pay for infrastructure services like trash pickup and extra trash bin recyclables. Even though, of course, tourism's not responsible for those things, the residents saw it differently. And I think that destination promotion is going to have a reckoning with just what their corporate responsibility is in their community.
Well, that brings up a big question, and I think is going to be really engage the research community that is focused on helping the travel and tourism industry for so many years. Is that when you're in it up under the right, every year's a record, every year's a record. You just kind of get into that. That's what we're chasing is another record. We get great Longwoods studies to come back and tell us who all came and how much they spent. Now it might be the conversations I've had, and I know the conversations that will be had over the course of the next 20 days is, all right, one, in the near term, we want to get bodies in here so that we can support our local businesses and our restaurants and our retail, and we want bodies that can spend some money and kind of take what we can get. But midterm, long term, this is a real opportunity for destinations to identify the people that they want and are the best fits for that community, and maybe go for the quality over quantity or the yield over the volume opportunities. And I don't know that you guys have started to have those conversations with clients about kind of that. To me, kind of seems to, when I think the short term, near term is one thing, but really putting an eye on the ball and having those conversations within the community for midterm, long term is critical right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the outdoor destinations are obviously the leaders in that. They've moved way forward in those conversations. I think for more urban places, it's harder for them to see that, and because of their visitor mix. And but yeah, we'll have to look to the Colorados and Utahs of the world for leadership there.
And that's something, Will, I've been talking to a couple of island destinations specifically, but also some more urban areas, is this conversation of quality over quantity. I hate to say that when we're talking about travelers, but for time constraints. But especially when we're talking about things like capacity changing, where only 25 people can be in a room together, or restaurants running at 50%, is looking at not only who's driving the volume growth in a destination, but who's driving the spend and the impact growth. And that's a conversation we've been having about, is getting the lower volume down so that we can actually, as an industry, interact and create those experiences where they are spending and staying and doing. And that's so important for recovery, is it's not just who's driving the volume to the destination, but who's driving the time and the engagement in the market itself.
And the seasonality of when we're trying to get people and flattening out some of those rallies to keep full-time jobs. Adam, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Well, I think that one of the enduring legacies of this crisis, there's a lot of talk about that. What will be the sea change effect of this? Are we in a indefinite new normal? These sorts of things. And there are different answers to that question, right? What's the legacy of this crisis? And I don't think that it's going to be fear. In fact, I think that history very strongly supports the idea that travel will come back, and that people will not be afraid for long. People have short-term memories, and the motivators of travel, income growth, economics, the value of meeting together, the beauty of a vacation with loved ones, all those things are going to be intact and be highly motivational on the other side of this crisis. So the enduring legacy isn't fear. I think it's gratitude, actually. And we're going to experience that in a number of different ways. One of them is that we all are going to be incredibly grateful when we can meet together and not like this. It's going to mean something to us that it didn't mean before. And we won't forget this. I tell my kids they won't forget at home learning, and they won't. They're actually back in school and they appreciate it amazingly. The same thing will be true of being able to travel freely, and it's that dynamic of having something taken away from us. Right? We have lost to some extent the freedom to travel, and so once that's restored, there's going to be incredible gratitude for that. Every bit of normal we experience, we get another piece of that, and so I think that has, connecting it to your original question, an implication on the resident side as well, because communities are now experiencing what life is like without a travel economy, in large part. And it's not pretty, and they don't like it, right? The jobs lost, businesses closed, the attractions and restaurants that they like are not surviving. And so, it's not dissimilar to what we experienced after 9/11, where there was a renewed appreciation of the travel industry because we experienced what happens to the economy when the travel industry gets brought to its knees. I think we're going to experience that in an even more profound way on the other side of that. And that is a real possible benefit as we begin to try to influence the sentiment of our communities, because I think they're going to have a renewed appreciation for travel and the effect of it on their destinations.
Now that couldn't be a better way to kind of wrap up on a positive note. I want to hit on just two quick questions that we've had from the audience, and one was besides COVID, this is from Paula. Besides COVID, is there any data regarding the civil unrest around the election, and is that having any impact on the travel industry as well? Are we tracking that or monitoring that? Anybody?
When there was a lot of unrest this summer, people asked that, and we did not see that have a big impact. Now, on the election, I have not specifically addressed that, Andrea. I don't know if you have. I have not specifically addressed that yet. But Adam, you'll appreciate this as an economist. That I've seen a couple of economists speak lately, and they showed us this historical data about how actually presidential elections don't impact the economy. They said the economy expresses itself and wants to grow and bloom regardless of who's president. Obviously, policy makes a big difference, and they've said that the policy takes a long time usually to implement, And so they were encouraging us to not get so hung up on the election. And my guess, now again, I haven't developed the question set on this, but I don't know if the outcome of the election is causing people to not travel or make travel plans right now. So it might be something that just looms larger than it's actually, impacting behavior. But I'm totally open to other points of view on it too.
Erin, we haven't asked that in our survey yet. I think we're still a little bit around a month out from the election, but looking at when there were other studies around this back with the 2016 election, it found that people cared, but it didn't actually deter or attract people from traveling. It's about the experience that they're looking to go have. And while they may support or not support the shifts in politics, it didn't deter them. So we haven't asked recently, but past data would say we're kind of on point with your response there.
Great. Another question that was asked by Heidi Hind, asking about the outlook for the cruise industry and how the cruise industry mimics the normal domestic travel business. And Adam, have you got any? Go ahead, Erin.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say we've seen cruisers. They don't view cruising as unsafe. They're saying that they're ready to go back to cruising. But anyway, Adam, I'm not sure what you see on a macro level.
Yeah, it's one of the most surprising points of data, isn't it? But and I've had people ask me, like, is the cruise industry done? Like, is it ever going to exist again? And these questions are asked by people that don't cruise. If you cruise, you love your cruises, and you can't wait again. And the reality is that there are a lot of safety protocol that the cruise industry has and is implementing as well. That's going to make it safe, relative to any other type of trip. And yes, cruising will be back. How is it going to affect the shipbuilding industry? Well, these are very long-term decisions, capital decisions. So I don't think there are going to be a lot of orders for new ships in the near term. But the ships that are under construction and continue to be built, and the industry, if you look 5 years out, will probably be bigger than it is right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch and talk to the sales funnels and cruise. Just to the sales funnels in the meetings convention business is doing really, really well. And then one last question, and I'm not sure that we have an answer for this, but it was a question about if businesses are going to face liability exposure when they asks employees to travel and get exposed to COVID. And I know that that's one of the big issues that has been advocated for by U.S. Travel in their efforts on Capitol Hill, and they've been very, very aggressive in making sure that there's some sort of liability limitation as it relates to COVID. And so I think that's a legitimate request, and I know by practice that what I've seen and the conversations that we've had with partners around the country is, it's really becoming an individual decision, much like it has been to work from home or to go into the office when the office finally opens. So I can't believe we've made an hour has flown by. This has been amazing conversation. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Could we get like a last kind of final thought from each of you on I love the optimism, Adam, kind of a thought on kind of where we go and encouragement for marketers as we move forward into 2021 and the rest of the year.
I've already given my final one, so I'll yield to my co-presenters.
I'll say don't even though things are looking up, but don't take your eye off of safety. It's still the most important thing. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think people really want to, they want to relax and escape and have new experiences, but they need to feel safe. So take care of that fundamental need first, and don't forget that.
And you can travel safely.
Yes. And you absolutely can. I did this week.
Brian, what closing parting thoughts?
Just thank you for putting all this together, and this was a wonderful panel discussion. I learned more just listening to the other panelists than I think I was able to teach others by sharing. And so my closing thought is, if you ever get a chance to listen to any of these other folks on the panel again, make sure you take the opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Brian. Andrea, closing thought.
For sure, it's echo what my colleagues have said. Is travel's going to come back. The data keeps showing us that there's pent-up demand, and for the last 7 months that we've been in this, which has been 7 months, is that we've seen that there's consistently pent-up demand. Travel's going to come back, and your resident is going to be at the heart of what we're doing. It's about health and safety, and it's about clarity of message. Is establish those guidelines and communicate them clearly, and encourage your residents to get out in your community and travelers to come and do it in a safe way and have fun, because we can still enjoy travel during the pandemic safely.
Amen. Andre, thank you so much for sponsoring this. Thanks to Longwoods International. Thank you all, Adam, Aaron, Andrea, and Brian. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking the busy time out of a crazy schedules to join us at the eTourism Summit. We will resume next Monday, and we'll start talking marketing planning, KPIs. We'll have a keynote session from the chief evangelist at Salesforce, Brian Solis, and we're going to continue on this marketing conversation virtually, so we can all be prepared to be successful in 2021. So again, thank you all for your time today. Thanks for the incredible insight, information, and the background to help us all be successful next year. So thanks again, and we really appreciate it. We'll see you Monday, same time, same place.
Bye.